Hello everyone, it's Lily here with another video, and I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a video. It's around a month or two since I've uploaded a video, but that's solely because I've been working on this little project here, and it's a series that I'm going to start publishing on YouTube in a couple of weeks called the Web Developer Series. And in this video, I want to run through the entire syllabus of this course. I don't want to talk about things in much details, but I do want to introduce you to everything we are going to be talking about. And there's quite a bit of things, as you can see. It is a very long course, lots of material, and it's very comprehensive. So we start off with our course basics, which is where you are right now, and it's the least substantial unit in this entire course. It just covers things about the syllabus and how the course works, and I'm just going to give you some advice in this section. Then we're going to move on to introduction to front end. So we're going to talk about what front end development is, what backend development is, and how they differ, what HTML is, what CSS is, and what JavaScript is. But you still don't write a whole lot of code until this unit when we actually talk about HTML. So there are two units on HTML, Introduction and Intermediate HTML. Then once you finish that and move on to CSS, which is how we make things look nice, we're going to add some styles in, and that's where the project starts to get a little bit more exciting. I'm going to have you make a little image gallery for a photography portfolio site. We're also going to do a little blog site. So 2 units on CSS, Intro and Advanced. We're also going to talk about things like typography, fonts, including custom fonts using Google Font, forms, form validations, and lots of topics. Then we're going to talk about Bootstrap, which is a CSS and JavaScript framework that helps you make nice looking website really quickly and easily. And in that unit, we're going to make a few projects, including a portfolio site and a startup landing page or a home page for a startup. Then we hit JavaScript, and that's where things, in my opinion at least, starts to get really interesting and exciting. We're going to start talking about first real programming language, JavaScript. So we start with the basics, and there's a lot of things to talk about with JavaScript. As you can see, it pretty much takes up from here all the way to the end. Everything involves JavaScript, and to be fair, everything involves HTML and CSS as well, but JavaScript becomes the focus, and that's how we're going to start making robust web applications, not just some simple websites, and I'll expand on the difference in the next unit, but let's keep moving. So JavaScript basic, then we're going to talk about something called control flow, which is how we add basic logic into our application with the JavaScript. And then we're going to talk about functions, JavaScript arrays and objects, 2 different data structures. And then we're going to move on to my favorite topic, which is DOM manipulation, which is how we interact with HTML and CSS using JavaScript. So to some of you, this might just be a bunch of random words you've never heard in your life, or something that you can't really make sense of. So basically, it's how we start making things exciting. When I click on a page, something happens. We can start changing colors, animating things, moving things across the screen. It's very official and fun. And then we have another unit on DOM events, which is some other DOM manipulation that we can focus on. Then we have a color game project, which is a substantial and pretty complex game that we make together. It's an entire unit, around 8 or 9 videos creating this game. So it's a pretty legit project. Then we move on to a popular library called jQuery, and we're going to focus on that for 3 units, Introduction to jQuery and Advanced jQuery. And then we build a really nice looking responsive to-do list project together. So that's to do with some coding as well. And it's an entire unit, around 7 or 8 videos there too. And then we have a big switch. So everything up until this point, excluding the first course basics of it, talks about front-end web development, which we'll talk about what it means and what's the difference between front-end and back-end and full stack and all that stuff in the next unit. But I just want to point out that this is all front-end and this is all back-end. So right here, there's a big line where things shift. So we'll move to the back end, and we'll start by talking about the very basics, just like we did up here for front end. So we're going to talk about what is the back end and what are some things that are involved. We're going to talk about some diagrams. We're going to draw some things out, and I'm going to show you some examples of sites and how the back end is set up on some popular websites. And then we're going to talk about the command line. We're going to cover how do you navigate to the command line or the terminal. We're going to talk about what different commands you can enter. Definitely the most hacker looking thing we cover. If you've ever seen a stereotypical hacker scene in the movie, they're usually typing things into the command line. So we will talk about that, and we're going to be using it for the rest of the course. And then we're going to take a look at Node.js, which is an introduction to Node.js, and then we're going to take a look at an introduction to Express, which is a Node framework that we'll be using. Now, again, I know this is a bunch of words, but Express is basically just a Node framework we'll be using to create our web applications. And we'll continue with those two things for the rest of the course. Then we're going to talk about Intermediate Express, basically some more advanced topics. And then we get to something different, Yelp Camp Basics. And you'll notice there's a few different instances of Yelp Camp. We have Yelp Camp Basics, Yelp Camp Data Persistence, Yelp Camp Comments, Yelp Camp Adding Awk, and Yelp Camp Cleaning Up. And Yelp Camp definitely starts to sound weird after you've repeated it enough times. But what it is basically a complex application that we will be creating together, and one that we'll keep on revisiting rather than one-off small projects where it's really hard to get something substantial with just one unit or just a few videos. This is a big project that we'll continually be revisiting, and don't worry, we're going to have plenty of shorter, smaller projects. I'm a really strong believer that you should start by seeing a small instance of something working, and then you make a little small project, and then you apply to something big. This way you get both ends of the spectrum, and you're not just thrown into the deep end immediately making a huge project, but then you're not also stuck making some teeny tiny toys for the entirety of this course. I want you to have something that you can be proud of, and something that is really, really complex at the end of this course. So Yelp Camp is a Yelp-like clone for campgrounds, campsites, and outdoor activities. So we can create a campground, have photos, leave comments, and all that fun stuff. We're going to talk about authentication. We're going to talk about authorization. And every time we learn a new feature, we're going to add it into Yelp Camp. So we start there, Yelp Camp Basics, and that's the first time we see the app. We're going to set up the very basic structure, and then we're going to talk about databases. We're going to talk about MongoDB, which is the particular database that we will use, and we're going to make a small project there. And then we're going to go back to Yelp Camp and add in MongoDB so that we now have a database connected to our camp. And then we're going to talk about a really important topic called RESTful routing. Now, this is a way of planning our applications, a pattern that we use, that we follow, called REST. And we're going to build a nice looking blog app using RESTful routes and a new CSS and JavaScript framework called Semantic UI, which is similar to Bootstrap, which you learned earlier in the course here. And the idea is just to expose you to another technology, another popular framework. Hopefully you start to see some of the similarities and draw some comparisons there. Then we move on to one of the more important units, database associations. So how do we have multiple things in our database that are connected, like users and comments, or blog posts and comments, and tags and votes, and how are they interrelated and connected to one another? Then we go back to Yelp Camp and we add in comments. So you learn about database association in a smaller project, and then we're going to add it into Yelp Camp. And then we move on to authentication, user login, user signing up, signing out, and we're going to do all of that using Passport.js. And we're going to add that into our own little small application. And then we're going to do what we've been doing before. We're going to go back to Yelp Camp and we're going to add in authentication so that now we have to log in and log out to use Yelp Camp, or at least for some features. And then we reach another unit about Yelp Camp, where at this point we've covered so much that we need to go back and clean up some things. We've got to refactor, which basically means we got to move some code around. We're going to have to rewrite some so that it's cleaner and shorter, more modular. So you'll see exactly what I mean. And that unit is devoted to reorganizing this large app, because at that point it's gotten very large. And then we talk about authorization, which is another important topic, which is basically permissions, different levels of things that users are allowed to do. So authentication is just letting people log in, while authorization is making sure that when I'm logged in, I can only delete photos that belong to me, or I can only edit comments I created. So I can't screw with somebody else's comments, and I can't delete their photos unless I have the permission to do that. So we'll talk about how that works, and then we're going to add it into Yelp Camp. So there's definitely a lot of stuff we need to cover, a lot of technologies, but the key point is we go through this in a very logical and well thought out order. It's definitely less intimidating than it might seem. So there's a lot of really exciting materials and fun projects that we're going to do. I hope that you stick with me throughout this course, and I hope to see you in the next video.